Jai Shri Ram, everyone. As I had mentioned in a previous video, I recently became a vegetarian, and I've now been vegetarian for about 2.5 months now. And just recently, I've started to try to cook food without using onions and garlic. Now, obviously, if you know anything about Hinduism, these ideas kind of go hand in hand, where a lot of people who are vegetarian also abstain from these two particular things, and there are kind of mythological, for lack of a better term, reasons as to why that is. There's also the reason based on the gunas that these are rajasic foods that kind of inspire rajasic feeling and rajasic thoughts within you, and so obviously if you're trying to lead a sattvic life, you should be avoiding such things. And it got me thinking about basically two related things. One, people that regularly eat onions and garlic, which is of course the vast majority of people, to varying degrees, they feel that it's very difficult to not eat it or to cook without it. And also, people who are non-vegetarian find it difficult to be vegetarian. I wanted to talk about both of those ideas right now. First off, anything that any community does as far as a food habit is not difficult, full stop. Evidenced by the fact that millions of people do it, right? As Hindus, we might look at Jains and think that people who are trying to strictly follow a Jain diet where they don't eat things that grow underneath the ground must be very restrictive and it's so difficult and so on. But obviously, I mean, of the 5 million or however many Jains that there are in the world, a significant number of them do adhere to that kind of diet. So if, huge numbers of people are able to eat a wide variety of different food and cook different things, get their nutrition, and make all kinds of tasty dishes full of empty calories that they like, then it really can't be so difficult that you need to think, oh, maybe my better self tells me that I should or need to do this, but it's just too hard, so I'm not going to do it. That's one thing. Second thing is, another issue that I've found is that people don't really understand that if you learn how to cook, then everything becomes available to you. Where if you have to rely on eating out at restaurants a lot, or ordering food, or eating kind of microwavable meals and stuff like that, obviously your food habits and choices are going to be limited by whatever is offered there. And of course, since the majority of people eat meat, and here in the Western world, the overwhelming majority of people eat meat and, onions, garlic, and all of this other kind of stuff, it's difficult to find products that you can actually eat a varied diet and stick to that kind of diet, right? But if you learn how to cook, then you can make whatever you want. You can use any kind of cooking fat that you want. You can use any kind of dal and vegetables and fruits and grains and spices and herbs or not use them as much as you want to. So I just want to say that if you've ever thought that it's difficult to do X kind of diet or develop X kind of habit, just look at the people who are already doing it. It's not that hard. It's not that impossible, but, it's obviously not that easy either. You have to put forth effort to make a change, which with anything in life takes some amount of effort. Now, my mom is she also became vegetarian, but she uses onions and garlic regularly and doesn't see any reason to not consume it. And she also considers this to be a Brahmin practice to not eat onions and garlic because our caste is Vishwakarma. So part of our caste is vegetarian, part of our caste is non-vegetarian. Nobody in our caste traditionally abstained from onions or garlic, even the vegetarians. So the way that she grew up, this is where she always saw this. And also in Karnataka especially, we have a significant portion of vegetarians who are not Brahmins. They come from this community called Lingayats, and they're very numerous and also kind of politically influential and stuff like that, especially in the northern and central parts of the state. And they are traditionally vegetarians, but they don't abstain from onions and garlic, and they actually eat a lot of onions in their traditional, very spicy Uttar Karnataka cuisine. So she had always thought she'd only encountered Brahmins who would avoid onions and garlic, and because of the fact that we're not Brahmins, she considers this a strange thing for me to try to do, and also just something that it just doesn't seem natural. It doesn't seem normal. Um, she's not that way with non-vegetarian food, even though we come from a non-vegetarian family. But I have met a lot of non-vegetarians who do feel that way, especially if they come from jatis that are quote unquote Kshatriya type jatis, like your Rajputs, your Marathas, and things of that nature, because they feel like eating meat somehow makes them more like masculine and able to do the kind of Kshatriya type duties that they traditionally had back in the old days, and it's become part of their ethos to eat meat, and oftentimes to eat large amounts of meat very regularly. And so I've met a lot of those people that feel that tell me, like, not only do they think it's difficult to be vegetarian, they would actually face some kind of backlash from their own family, who is obviously Hindu, for doing that, because they think that they're kind of going back on their past, which also puts me in a kind of interesting position where, as I said earlier, my caste traditionally also has a lot of vegetarians in it as well, because our status was basically we are Vishwakarma is our god. So we're related to all of these construction type industries, which is why we take him as our god. So we're, blacksmiths, goldsmiths, carpenters, sculptors, and masons. And these jobs are traditionally considered to be Shudra type jobs. So in the kind of fourfold Varnashrama dharma, we would come under the Shudra category. But we also trained some of our men to be priests. And so they, traditionally Vishwakarma people, for their, weddings and last rites and all of these different kind of sanskars, they would get Vishwakarma priests as opposed to actual Brahmin priests to do that. And obviously, like other Dvija communities, they're also, they get the Upanayan done and they do Sandhyavandan and all of those kinds of things. So that process of kind of assimilating more into the mainstream of what is thought of as kind of traditional Hindu lifestyles, many of our people of our caste also became vegetarian. You'll also find that a lot of the people who come from these sculpting backgrounds, where their ancestors sculpted murtis and sculpted the sculptures that are on the inside and outside of temples, that they tended to be very much vegetarian, because this was a kind of sacred duty that they had apart from just normal construction type of craftsman work, and so they felt that they needed to be vegetarian for that reason as well. And I've also heard, my dad, who has been vegetarian for a very long time, he told me once that when he would go back to India, sometimes he would interact with people that found it kind of amazing that he had lived in America for so long and was still a vegetarian and still didn't drink alcohol, because they thought that somehow, because of the fact that the mainstream American population eats lots of meat and drinks alcohol, that when Indians go there, they then kind of magically fall into those habits as well. And I think we have seen a lot of that coming from people who are really not in touch with their culture at all, who basically, they basically hold to some quasi-Hindu or Hindu practices because of the fact that they were raised that way. Then when they're in a different kind of environment, they don't hold to that. I mean, you see that among people who were raised non-vegetarian, then they start to also eat meat. You see that among people who are raised vegetarian, start to eat non-vegetarian food. You see it among people who were raised with parents that never touched alcohol, that start to drink alcohol. So these are all issues that we also face as well, and they're all just based on kind of normal lifestyle, where it's not that difficult to get into a habit where you avoid certain things like eating meat, especially if you're a Hindu, because for us, even people who are traditionally non-vegetarian, most of them ate vegetarian food most of the time and would eat non-vegetarian food maybe once a week or something of that sort. So to give up that and replace it with a kind of food that you already are accustomed to eating is very easy and doable. And I think that whenever I hear people saying that this is difficult to do or I can't do this, it's really just a lack of willpower and laziness and to some degree also not knowing how to cook. But, if you're a vegetarian but you're not a vegan, it's pretty easy to find even kind of junk food and restaurant food and food to order that you can easily obtain. So, yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say today. The sabji that I made was surprisingly tasty, which, again, when you're accustomed to eating onions and garlic all the time, you kind of get it into your brain that food without that is bland, which also doesn't make sense because when I look at the vegetarian recipes that I've made, many of them don't include either onions or garlic, and a few of them don't include both, even before I started trying to do this consciously, just because the recipe itself didn't call for either of those things. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I would also say, as just a kind of call to action, that whenever you see or hear people voicing these kinds of opinions, no matter what your own actual personal food habits are, just push back against them and just tell them, you're free to make your own decisions and eat the way you want and do what you want, but you shouldn't be under the misapprehension that something that's very natural and easy to do is so difficult that it's this insurmountable challenge that you can't get past. Jai Shri Ram.